Eren is the literal opposite of freedom. Friedrich Nietzsche's ideals regarding active nihilism are one of essence in this essay. So as we'll try to make sense of Eren's actions and cognition, we will inevitably fall into Nietzsche's ideology, as they are both congruent with each other. Eren's most prevalently and intentionally exposed value is his appreciation of freedom. In the first 3 seasons, we are given the explanation that regards this as being the ideology of the Attack Titan itself. This isn't as consistent, especially when we think of Eren's ideology in the first episodes of the series. Here, he wonders about what's beyond the walls, and is beyond amazed when Armin tells him about the sea. These small details, all overlooked at first glance, prove to be extremely essential to the story. It wasn't the Attack Titan's ideal that valued freedom so much. It was Eren's influence to the power of the Attack and Founder which allowed him to see and interfere with a future that sufficed this. So it was Eren's ideology at last that made all the past successors value freedom. Through this circle, Eren influenced himself later, when he acknowledged the fact that the Attack Titan values freedom in Season 3. This power is the power to save my friends, is the power to take back the world, the power to be free. Although, only in Season 4, Episode 16 does he state it literally. The Attack Titan has one singular goal, to be free. As the series progresses, we are able to see why he is so obsessed with freedom, because he's deprived of it. All his actions accumulate to the same attempt, the attempt of gaining freedom. Let's now step aside from Eren and focus on the ideology of Nietzsche as for regarding the concept of freedom. Nietzsche believed in what was later labeled as active nihilism. It is essentially a form of radical thinking, which implies a complete rejection of already existing values and the desire to create a new order of meaning, even if that requires the destruction of old ones. More so, he advocated for a complete repudiation of existing moral frameworks. He also evidently advocated for a nihilist's new desire in forging meaning in a world devoid of inherent value. Also, the idea of creating new meaning in all chaos demands some amount of brutality and sacrifice, suffice for the existing values to crumble and for the new ones to triumph. All of these 3 main concepts present in Nietzsche's ideology will serve as bullet points in our further analysis. Eren essentially wasn't born with this ideology in mind. Evidently, he was more accustomed to a classical liberalist perspective. All of this, however, changes in one of the most important episodes in Attack on Titan, the basement, where he finds out that all of his ideology crumbles under his feet. Not only was he killing people all this time, in the form of Titans, but he was also fighting other people, which were not only aware of their existence, but against it. With his mind-crumbling realization, he must adapt in order to save whatever's left of his sanity. With these in mind, he also gains access to Grisha's memories, gaining an Eldian's in Marley perspective of living. Not only this, but then arrives in Marley and stands between them as a fellow Eldian himself. All this time, he had the idea that the world would be perfect if Titans were eradicated, that people were inherently good, and as long as Titans disappeared, that all problems would dissolve. He was essentially holding classical liberalism core values, which generally permitted everyone to do whatever they wanted, as long as they didn't negatively influence others. Eren disregards this ideology because it wasn't consistent with the real world. He essentially discovers that people not only cause harm, but often do so out of allegiance to seemingly pointless causes, such as historical grievances or events that no longer directly affect their own lives. As this forces his entire value system to fall apart, every scene when we see Eren, when he is either conscious and not including flashbacks, up until his meetup with Zeke, is either marked with seriousness or with sadness. Here, we see a sudden change in his behavior. This is peak psychological understanding from Isayama. After he gains access to the Founder's full powers, he becomes an atemporal and aspatial being. He has all the time in the world and all the timelines to reflect over and create the perfect ideology for his needs. Therefore, in the end, he is satisfied at last with this ending. Not emotionally, of course, but rationally. This is because an emotional satisfaction would imply both being with Mikasa and his friends, as well as a perfect world devoid of war, which is, as defined by Eren, an utopia. As saddening as this may sound, it's truly exceptional how he sacrifices in the end for one of these sakes, beautifully in contrast with Nietzsche's form of the Übermensch, which is a concept in his ideology representing the superhuman, the one capable of doing all of which Eren just did, resetting his values by destroying the old and creating new ones, as well as allowing for all the suffering to not alter his plans, but to permit the existence of functional ones. So this begs the question, why didn't Eren influence himself in thinking this from the start? Why didn't he skip the suffering of learning the truth? This begs the question, why didn't Eren influence himself in thinking this from the start? Why didn't he skip the suffering of learning the truth, only in the basement? Simple. Up until that point, he had almost all he knew he wanted. Mikasa was near him, all of his friends, and just a problem that was separated from him by a literal physical wall. He left the gateway for himself, a place in space and time where he could feel happiness and joy. This, if I do say so myself, is as daunting as it is gorgeous. Now that we've explained why it all happens, let's see how it unfolds. All takes place from the moment Eren kisses Historia's hand until his inevitable death. He has all the time and possibilities he wants, but it's futile, since his head's messed up. Armin, my head has gotten all messed up. The Founder's power has made it so. There is no past or future. It all exists at once. So I had to do it. That day, that moment. Bertolt wasn't supposed to die yet. That's why I let him go, and made her go towards my mom. Before this, Eren was able to see just fractures of memories, of carefully selected memories, all chosen by himself. But what do I actually mean by this? Well, every single time the Attack Titan was able to see memories, either from the past or future, it was exactly something that made him fight for freedom. Something dictated by Eren, supporting his vision. They were slaves to him, slaves created by himself and for his cause. Why does this matter? Because he manipulated this all towards himself, since the Founder's Ymir's death. In the immense infinity of choices he struggled for at least 2,000 years in creating this chronology. The troubled Eren, the one after Historia's kiss, up until his physical contact with Zeke, didn't even come close to the pain Eren felt from that point on. He dictated a future in which he dies and lives a painful existence, from which only his childhood held any happiness and joy. In this cruel state, all he ever wanted was freedom, the one thing he could never have. With all of these possibilities before him, he was stuck in choices. He was stuck in suffering, put there by himself. Eren's only prize was him seeing Mikasa with his own eyes, talking to his friends, temporarily saving Eldia, and then finally resting. In this futile existence, he was able to take his plan to the end. He was able to make a choice and not fall into nihilistic tendencies. He was truly a superhuman. Thank you for joining me in this exploration. Until next time.